Ethan came home from his business trip late in the evening, exhausted but glad to be back. Olivia, his wife, whom he had started calling Liv ever since they first met in college, was there to greet him with a soft smile. She looked different to him now, maybe a bit more vibrant, a bit more eager, and tonight, a bit more something. But Ethan brushed it off as his own tired eyes playing tricks on him after too many airport terminals. "Ethan, honey, I have some news," Liv said with a small, almost shy grin. Her eyes sparkled, but Ethan thought he saw something more, something that didn't quite match the smile she wore. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. Ethan paused as if the words hung in the air longer than usual, like an echo he wasn't quite ready to face. Still, he quickly composed himself, giving her a reassuring nod and pulling her into a gentle hug. He told himself to act happy even if, inside, the news sat with a strange weight. "That's wonderful, Liv," he murmured softly. She took a breath and held his hand a little tighter. "We're going to have twins, Ethan." Twins. That word seemed to press even harder on Ethan's already heavy heart. He forced a smile and nodded along as Liv went on about doctors, due dates, and things that felt foreign to him. He was supposed to feel joy. He knew that. But instead, all he could manage was a hollow acceptance and a faint attempt to mirror Liv's enthusiasm. Before he knew it, she was on to another topic. "Oh, and we'll have to do one of those big gender reveal parties. You know, maybe with fun contests and games. Doesn't that sound fun?" She practically bounced with excitement, her eyes sparkling. "Sure," he replied, trying to hide his weariness. "Whatever you want, Liv." Their young son, Ben, perked up when he overheard his mother. "A party?" he asked, his little face lighting up at the idea of games and festivities. Ethan smiled at Ben, ruffling his hair, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that gnawed at him. He watched Ben, seeing him through a different lens now. Ethan spent a bit of time with Ben, letting the boy chatter on about the party ideas Liv had mentioned. But even as he listened, his mind was elsewhere. Lost in a muddle of suspicion and dread, he tried to push down but couldn't. Liv's news had only solidified something Ethan had long feared. He knew too much already. He had started to uncover Liv's secrets months ago, secrets that had shifted their family's foundation beneath his feet. And now, as the news of twins hovered in the air, he realized he couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Their family was at a crossroads, and he felt as though he were standing alone, watching the road divide before him. A few days later, Ethan found himself heading back to the airport, preparing for yet another business trip. The rhythm of Ethan's life had long been set by the steady beat of work trips. Being away from home came with his job. He had grown used to the long flights, the stale air of hotel rooms, the sight of unfamiliar cities under hazy morning skies. For years, Ethan hadn't worried about what was happening back home. He trusted Liv completely, always believing their marriage was built on a foundation of honesty and love. But now, as he settled into his seat on the plane, a weight sat heavy on his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't known before, one that had been creeping in slowly but surely over recent months, a bitter, quiet unease. Ethan had never been the kind of man to question Liv's loyalty. He loved her, after all, and she was the mother of his son. But now some things just didn't sit right. Little details he had pushed aside before now kept creeping back, pulling at him with nagging persistence. He flipped open his laptop, his fingers hovering over the keys before they moved to open a folder. It wasn't his usual collection of project files or spreadsheets. No, this was something he had kept hidden, locked away even from himself, like a bad dream he didn't want to remember. He started scrolling, letting his eyes scan over the familiar screen, absorbing the silent images playing out in front of him but feeling none of the satisfaction he had hoped he might. Instead, a hollow, sickening sadness swept over him as he scrolled through the contents. The videos only added to his unease, filling him with a strange, unexpected anger that he had kept bottled up inside, trying to pretend it wasn't there. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment and leaned back, trying to shake the sense of betrayal that seemed to be settling deeper in his bones with each passing second. His mind drifted, and suddenly an image of Brian, his neighbor, floated into view. Brian, with his easygoing smile, the way he had come over to help Ethan clear the yard last summer, without a second thought. Brian, who was always quick with a joke, a pat on the back, and a warm, friendly laugh. Could someone really be that good, that warm, that open, without hiding something underneath? The thought left a sour taste in Ethan's mouth, and he couldn't shake it. People can be chameleons, he told himself. People can put on masks, especially those you trust the most. That's what kept him uneasy, the possibility that he had been fooled. It all circled back to one thing, one final, unavoidable truth that kept his mind occupied even as the plane cut through clouds, high above a world he suddenly felt disconnected from. Ethan knew what was coming next. He had to be ready for that party Liv had planned, the grand gender reveal event. She was so excited about it. It would happen in a few months, she had told him, and she had hinted that it would be an event like no other, something their friends and family would remember for years. But as Ethan sat there, looking out at the gray sky beyond his window, he knew that for him, this party wouldn't be about balloons and colored confetti. No, he would be preparing for something else entirely. Ethan wanted to end it all, to tear down the shaky facade he and Olivia were living in, to finally step out of the lie he felt caged in. But he couldn't, not yet. He needed time to get his affairs in order. There was too much at stake, and if he acted now, he'd risk losing more than just his peace of mind. For the first time, he found himself questioning the things he had once taken for granted about his family, even his little boy Ben. Ben was only 6, his heart and his eyes pure, and the last thing Ethan wanted was for him to be caught in the middle of a storm he never asked for. So Ethan would bide his time, hold on to his suspicions, and quietly build a path toward freedom, a way to walk away from the life he once loved, with his head held high and his assets intact. The weeks crawled by like years, each one a strange mix of resentment, patience, and small preparations. Olivia was absorbed in the pregnancy, planning every detail of the twins' arrival with an excitement that would have been contagious in a different world. She chattered away about cribs and baby clothes, about how much fun the gender reveal party was going to be, never noticing the change in Ethan. She didn't see how his once open gaze had turned calculating, how he had started staying up late at night with his laptop. Not for work, but to gather everything he'd need for the road he was planning to take alone. Ethan played the role of the devoted husband, keeping up appearances while he meticulously prepared for the life he'd soon be living on his own terms. He met with his lawyer in secret, made careful adjustments to his finances, and arranged a new living setup, something modest and quiet, away from all the pretense. He even found time to investigate matters regarding Ben, a process that had kept him awake with worry. And as the months slipped by, Ethan became a master of patience. The day of the gender reveal party arrived, and their backyard had been transformed into a picturesque scene. Olivia had gone all out, colorful decorations, carefully arranged tables, a custom-made cake, and of course the large black balloon that held the pink or blue confetti. Family, friends, and neighbors were in attendance, all excited to celebrate the big moment. Olivia was glowing with happiness, moving from guest to guest, laughing and chatting, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Ethan moved through the crowd with quiet purpose. He wasn't here to celebrate. He wasn't here to play the part of the happy, expectant father. No, today was about something else entirely. He had spent months preparing for this moment, and now that it was finally here, he felt nothing but a calm, steady resolve. Olivia called everyone's attention, standing on the small platform they had set up in the backyard. She beamed as she held the large balloon, looking over the crowd. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this special day with us," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Family means everything to us, and with our 2 little ones on the way, we're just so excited to start this new chapter together." Ethan watched her closely, studying every expression, every movement. She was so good at this, so good at lying, at pretending. But today, her act would finally come to an end. She turned to him with a bright smile. "Ethan, are you ready?" Ethan nodded, stepping forward. He took a deep breath, glancing at the black balloon hovering in the center of the platform. The guests clapped, eager for the big reveal. But before Olivia could continue, Ethan raised a hand, signaling for silence. "Before we pop the balloon," he said, his voice carrying across the backyard, "I have a small gift for my wife. The crowd murmured with curiosity as he reached into his jacket and pulled out a neatly wrapped box. Olivia blinked, clearly surprised but still smiling. She probably thought this was some sweet, sentimental gesture, another perfect moment for her carefully curated life. She accepted the box, laughing softly. "Ethan, what is this?" "Open it," Ethan said simply. Olivia pulled at the ribbon, unwrapping the box with excitement. But as soon as she lifted the lid, her expression shifted. The color drained from her face as she looked inside. The guest grew silent, sensing that something was wrong. Olivia's hands trembled as she reached in and pulled out the first stack of papers. Divorce papers. The second stack was thinner, but no less devastating. DNA test results. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd as Olivia's breath hitched. She looked up at Ethan, her lips slightly parted, unable to form words. Ethan turned to the guests, his face unreadable. "I shouldn't be the one standing here," he said, his tone steady. "This reveal, these twins, they're not mine." Gasps echoed through the backyard. People exchanged stunned looks, their eyes darting between Ethan, Olivia, and the papers in her hands. Ethan shifted his gaze to Brian, who stood frozen near the refreshments table, his drink still in his hand. "Brian," Ethan continued, "this should be your moment." Every head turned toward Brian. His face was pale, his body rigid. The once friendly neighbor now looked like a man on the verge of collapse. His wife, who had been standing beside him, slowly stepped away, realization dawning in her wide, horrified eyes. The murmurs turned into chaos. Olivia's lips moved, but no words came out. She shook her head frantically, her body trembling. "Ethan, please," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan ignored her. He held up the DNA results. "I know everything," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "I even got a test for Ben." The crowd fell completely silent. Olivia's breath hitched audibly. Ethan's expression didn't waver. "He's not mine either." Olivia let out a strangled sob, clutching the papers so tightly that they crumpled in her hands. Brian's wife turned to him, her face contorted with rage. Without a word, she threw her drink in his face before storming off, shoving past guests as she went. Ethan finally looked at Olivia again. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, this is a mistake," she choked out. "You have to believe me, please." Ethan's voice was cold, emotionless. "I believed you once," he said. "Not anymore." A suffocating silence fell over the crowd, the weight of the revelation sinking into every stunned onlooker. Ethan took a step back, nodding toward the black balloon still floating above them. "Go ahead, Liv," he said. "Pop it. Let's see what color you and Brian are having." Olivia collapsed onto her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. She didn't reach for the balloon. She didn't move at all. Ethan didn't stay to watch. He turned on his heel, walking through the sea of silent guests, leaving behind the wreckage of his marriage, the whispers of the stunned crowd, and the woman who had betrayed him. He had nothing left to say, and for the first time in years he felt truly free. Ethan walked away from the party, leaving behind the shattered remains of the life he once thought he had. He didn't look back, not even when he heard Olivia's desperate sobs or the murmurs of the stunned guests. He stepped into his car, started the engine, and drove away, feeling lighter than he had in years. The first thing he did was check into a hotel. He needed time, space, distance from the chaos he had just unleashed. His phone vibrated relentlessly with calls and messages, but he ignored them. He already knew what they would say. Olivia would beg, Brian would panic, mutual friends would demand explanations. He didn't owe them anything. Instead, he took a deep breath and opened his laptop. He had already anticipated what came next. The legal battle, the custody fight, the financial maneuvers Olivia would attempt to pull. He had been preparing for this moment for months, making sure that when the truth finally came out, she would have nothing left to take from him. And he had one last move to make. He opened his email and attached the evidence, the surveillance footage, the text messages, the paternity results, and sent it to Olivia's family, Brian's wife, and every single guest who had attended the party. By the time the dust settled, everyone would know exactly who Olivia and Brian really were. Within days, Olivia's world collapsed around her. The party had been a disaster, but the true wreckage came afterward. Her parents were the first to call her. They were furious. They had always loved Ethan, had always believed she had a perfect marriage. The shame of what she had done, cheating on her husband, carrying another man's twins, lying to Ethan's face for years, was too much for them to handle. They cut her off financially, refusing to support her in the divorce. Her job, gone. The scandal spread fast thanks to Ethan's email, and word reached her boss. She had always worked in a field where reputation mattered. And now, she was radioactive. Her social life, destroyed. The friends she once bragged about, the ones who had attended the party and witnessed her humiliation firsthand, wanted nothing to do with her. She had spent years crafting a perfect life, a perfect marriage, a perfect image. Now it was all in ruins, and Brian was no longer by her side. Brian had always been cocky, always carried himself like he could do no wrong. But now he had lost everything. His wife, divorcing him, and thanks to Ethan's generosity in sharing the evidence, she had everything she needed to ensure Brian walked away with almost nothing. His home? Gone. His wife had kicked him out, and since he and Olivia had been sneaking around in Ethan's house, Brian had nowhere to go. His finances? In ruins. Not only was he now financially responsible for the twins Olivia was carrying, but his wife was suing for alimony and child support for their own kids. He had gone from living comfortably to being trapped in a financial nightmare. And Olivia? She was just another problem. He hadn't planned on actually raising kids with her. Their affair had been exciting when it was a secret, but now he saw Olivia for what she really was, a burden. They had betrayed their spouses, destroyed their families, and for what? A messy, complicated, miserable future. Brian wanted out. While Olivia and Brian's lives crumbled, Ethan's life flourished. His divorce was finalized within months. Thanks to his meticulous planning, Olivia walked away with almost nothing. She had no savings, no career, and no support. The best part? Ethan won full custody of Ben. Despite the DNA test proving Ben wasn't biologically his, the judge ruled in Ethan's favor. He was Ben's real father, the one who had raised him, loved him, cared for him. And when Ben was given the choice of where he wanted to stay, he chose Ethan without hesitation. That moment, more than anything else, was Ethan's greatest victory. Because Olivia had lost everything. Her husband, her lover, her reputation, her financial security, and most of all, she had lost her son. Months later, after the dust had settled, Olivia called Ethan. Her number flashed on his screen, and for the first time in a long time, he picked up. Her voice was shaky, desperate. "Ethan, can we talk?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching Ben play in the backyard, happier than he had been in years. "There's nothing left to talk about, Olivia." "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I lost everything. You made your choices," Ethan interrupted, his voice calm, steady. "Now you have to live with them." There was silence on the other end. He could hear her soft sobs, but he felt nothing. "Goodbye, Olivia," he said, and for the first time, he meant it. He was done. Months passed. Life moved forward. Ethan found himself on the balcony of his new home, looking out at the ocean, a cold beer in his hand. He had left behind the lies, the betrayal, the toxic weight of his past, and for the first time he felt at peace. Ben ran out onto the balcony, grinning. "Dad, look what I made!" Ethan turned, smiling at his son. "Let's see it, buddy." As Ben held up his drawing, Ethan thought back to everything he had been through. He had lost a cheating wife, but he had kept what truly mattered, and for that he was grateful. He had won.